Always like to check out Jacobin magazine for the dumbest take possible. These these socialists are responsible for shortages in bread lines. So basically, if there's any problem, like the worst solution you can think of would be proposed by them, and they don't disappoint. Six Things You're Not Hearing About Inflation by Julia Rock and David Sirota. Inflation is punching far above its weight in the minds of Americans immersed in the louder and louder media alarms about rising prices. So yeah, basically prices are going up due to the crazy amount of government stimulus and spending. But they see it, they're trying to spin it as a good thing because, well, there was a lot of, government did hand out a lot of money to regular people. So, hey, maybe maybe this inflation is it's worth it, and they're trying to downplay this. It's just often stripped of any context or policy prescriptions that might complicate the narrative, embarrasses the rich, or spotlight the predatory business practices of wildly profitable corporations. All right, so let's get into why inflation is a good thing, according to Jacobin. So, one, inflation at the very top. Perhaps the most important point being overlooked by the corporate media is inflation is being driven by the greed and power of the wealthy people and corporations, which is kind of a stupid reason because people are always greedy, and I guess those corporations were just as powerful. So why didn't they do it before? Oh, they waited till they were plotting in their smoke-filled room and they were waiting for COVID to happen. So now it's they just waited for the government to print and pump the economy with a bunch of money, and here they are springing out and driving the prices up in sync, in unison. So so people will think it's related to government printing a bunch of money and giving it to everybody and forcing people not to work. But the real reason is greedy corporations. As banks notch record profits, executives are finding ways to juice their salaries. There's a 20 to 30% private jet inflation caused by booming demand for rich people who saw their wealth soar during the pandemic. Well, this is just, maybe it has to do with something with the stocks. All this hot money that the government printed needs a place. So needs a place to be invested, put in. So you can see crazy stock evaluations, stock market going up, and a lot of these rich people or the CEOs own a lot of the company's stocks. So I could definitely see that. But the funny thing is here, they're trying, Jacobin, it's pretty annoying. They're trying to have it both ways. They're saying, later on in the article they'll say, this inflation it's not a bad thing because people's salaries are going up. But then here we go, it says the CEOs and the rich people's profits are going up, and then that's because they're greed. Corporate consolidation. Relatedly, unchecked corporate consolidation is making it easier for corporations to cite inflation crisis to unilaterally jack up prices, even as their huge profit margins show they don't actually need to. For many essential goods, ranging from diapers to insulin, these are just a few commodities that dominate the market for that product. When one or two companies that make the product raise prices, consumers have no choice to buy essentially goods at a higher price. But why didn't they do that before? Why do they wait till the government printed a bunch of money? And how do they know? Did they look at Starbucks's? Did they look at Starbucks's profit earnings sheet and said? I've seen completely opposite. That in order not to lose market share, these companies were eating the inflation out of their profits that they were, having to, Red Bull, the ingredients of Red Bull soared 40-50%. a bunch of their core ingredients sort of went up a lot. So, and then they thought it was temporary, so they were kind of eating it. But now they know that there's no end in sight, so they are raising prices. Monopolies restrict supply. This is bullshit. Wars and fossil fuels. There seems to be unspoken rule among corporate media that when it comes to fear-mongering about government spending, the deficit, inflation, U.S. military budget doesn't matter, isn't worth discussing. In fact, intervening in overseas conflicts, killing civilians, siphoning public money to military contractors have been proving major contributors to inflation. The Vietnam War, for example, was just long, bloody, unnecessary. It's also inflationary. Economists agree. Okay, well, I agree as well. Yeah, because they just... But here's the thing. Yes, the Vietnam War is inflationary because the government had to take the U.S. dollar off the gold standard and print a fucking whole bunch of money, which caused inflation to pay for their bullshit, wasteful war. And now they're doing the same thing for the quote-unquote COVID, to fight COVID, as a reaction to COVID. They didn't have to do all this money printing, but they are anyway. And so yeah, so you're admitting that it's the government's, it's not quote-unquote collusion, or it's not greed, it's the government printing a bunch of money to do something what it wants. So now the article is contradicting itself. You'll never see these facts discussed in corporate media. It appears journalists are too busy combining gas stations for people who are annoyed by how expensive it's getting to fill up their tank-sized SUVs. Well, why don't you just say that? And not everywhere price. I mean, Kentucky has way lower gas prices than super heavily taxed California. So, for the New York Times, for example, interviewed an auto repair shop owner last month who recalled recently filling up his 2003 Cadillac Escalade and seeing the price go above $100 when it used to be $45. This is a ridiculous editorial decision when you consider that 2003 Cadillac Escalades get 15 to 14 miles a gallon. There are no Hummer owners available. Unmentioned, the last time it would have typically cost $45 or less to fill up 2003 Escalade fuel tanks. Escalade fuel tank was in 2003. Okay. I mean, what is? Yeah, but there's poor people that don't drive Escalades. They drive their regular car, but they maybe it wasn't $45 to fill up before. Maybe it was $15, $20, and now it's $40. So it doesn't matter. The math still, it still scales. It's still relative. People are spending twice more money at the gas pump, and it might have something to do with Biden shutting down oil pipelines. I don't know. Maybe that's just an inkling, just a thought. Addressing the healthcare and housing crisis. The government has other tools at its disposal to manage the rising costs of living and exorbitant corporate profits. Biden, for example, has claimed that investments in healthcare, housing, and other sectors in the Democrats' Build Back Better social spending and climate bill will help address inflation in the longer term. Yeah, but in the shorter term, it will fuel inflation, would it? I mean, you're just printing and spending more money. It's inflationary. I mean, what is inflation? It's dollars competing for the same goods. Well, if the government's passing this Build Back Better and using a bunch of resources to repair highways or do social infrastructure or whatever the hell, you're competing with resources that the private sector needs. So yes, that you are bidding up prices. In truth, lawmakers have always addressed the fact that prices have risen faster in healthcare over the past 30 years than any other sector. Well, that's because of government inflation. Yes, anything that the government's heavily involved in, the prices are going up through the roof, way higher than inflation. Education, colleges, healthcare, housing, it's all government, and it's all government's regulation fault and all the special interests. After promising for years to pass legislation to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices, Democrats have included an extensively watered-down drug pricing provision. Yeah. let's see, what's their other reason here? The Fed trade-off. The Federal Reserve has a dual mandate to use monetary policy to maintain price stability and achieve the maximum employment. The bank managers that balancing act mainly by adjusting interest rates, the cost of borrowing money, and buying government bonds. In August 2020, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell announced at the central bank's annual symposium at Jackson Hole that the bank was changing its approach to inflation. For decades, the Fed had kept interest rates high, leading to low inflation or even deflation, and more importantly, kept unemployment high and to suppress bargaining power of workers. I mean, there's multiple things that are wrong with this statement. First of all, for decades, the Fed has not kept interest rates high. I mean, interest rates were below inflation. Interest rates were, the interest rate is so high. Yeah, open up a savings account. Even 10 years ago, you get like 0.01%. No, the interest rate was ultra low, artificially low, trying to artificially juice the economy, but it wasn't quite. It seems like the medicine was working less and less, and leading to low inflation. Okay, kept unemployment high enough. What do you mean unemployment? We had really low unemployment in America. Everything this paragraph is wrong. Now Powell is under pressure from inflation hawks to taper bond purchases and raise interest rates sooner. The pressure campaign seems to be having an impact. Fed Governor Christopher Waller implied in a recent statement to reporters that workers are taking advantage of a tight labor market and making him concerned about inflation. Similarly, Biden Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen also recently expressed some concern that raising wages could be a problem if inflation persisted. But if the Fed raises interest rates, making it more expensive for business to borrow money and discouraging spending, it will slow down the labor market recovery. Higher than usual inflation is less deflationary than mass unemployment, which would be the impact of interest rate hike or cutting back at social spending in an attempt to keep prices down, according to economists. Okay, so after 2007, the United States experienced many years of high unemployment. No, it didn't. And depressed growth. Yes, it did. But thanks to the part of the stimulus that was mostly now agreed too small. Yeah, I mean, we're experiencing after 2007 slow growth because the government is crowding out investment. The more government is spending, the more government spends of the economy, the slower the growth. I mean, here's an example. If America grew at 1% less over the past 100 years, we'd be poor in Mexico. So if Jacobin, you understand economics and really cared about the poor, they would advocate for something that grows the economy faster. But they aren't. They're advocating for shit that would help. Well, they would think that would, help people today, but lowering the growth rate and really hurting the people in the future. Price controls. Here we go. The socialists, the communists that brought you bread lines. They're. The one thing that economists all fucking agree on is if you put a price ceiling on something, but it costs higher to make it, well, that's how you get empty store shelves. But these idiots can never learn a lesson. Congress could tackle inflation without triggering mass unemployment if lawmakers are actually concerned about rising cost of living for workers in America. It could also do so without killing its further guiding Democrats' Build Back Better reconciliation bill, even though U.S. Chamber of Commerce is arguing that the legislation would make matters worse. Instead, lawmakers could address inflation by implementing price controls, meaning placing legal limits on the amounts of prices of certain goods can increase. So government workers are going to go around grocery stores with a clipboard and write down all the prices, and so you can only increase it by 5%, 4%. I mean, this is the recipe for bread lines. This is a recipe for empty store shelves. You know, this is what economists say. Economists say the cure for high prices is high prices. The more the prices go up, the more an incentive there is for companies for new entrepreneurs to get into the space and start providing more supply and competing away these high profit margins. But yet these guys want to do the opposite, complete opposite. If they have price controls, then other people who want to start companies and try to supply more goods, they would say, hey, there isn't that much money to be made here because you need to recoup the money of your investments, plus you need to pay interest on your loans. So it's the complete opposite. As a recent report from the Roosevelt Institute, who are these dumbasses, detailed, the United States has used price controls during wartime in the past, and Congress could grant Biden the statutory authority to do so. Well, yeah, first of all, is it wartime? Is it World War II right now? I mean, yes, they will use price controls, but that would lead to disaster. It made the actual standard of living for people fell during World War II. Like you couldn't get tires, you couldn't get fabric, people were just miserable. One benefit of price controls, according to Todd Tucker, the author of the Roosevelt Institute report, is that they would prevent corporations from using the guise of inflation to jack up prices beyond increased cost of input, report fat profits, as they've been doing for the recent weeks. I'm going to check out this report, but it sounds like a bunch of bullshit. The thing about crisis is that the normal forces of supply and demand don't work well, Todd Tucker told the Daily Poster. Firms who have a lot of power in the economy know that, and they can use inflation to charge people much more than increased costs that they are experiencing because of the crisis. Price control can tackle the problem. The government and the public aren't at the mercy of private forces here. What you are you are at the mercy because the private sector is providing the goods anyway. They're providing the goods, so if you cap the prices at a certain level, well, they just might choose not to provide that and might choose to provide goods that are not capped or switch production to something else. So you still rely on private investment. You don't control that. Even under communism, you don't really control people. You set the rules, and people didn't find it worthwhile to do your task, that they didn't want to lose money or they want to work for your low ass wages. So people just got lazy, didn't do anything, and then empty store shelves and horrible productivity ensued. But clearly these dummies can't learn that.